Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and I'll put in the attendance here in just a moment, and hopefully our presenter will be here soon.
I'm here. Hi, I'm Gail Mendez. I'll be the presenter today.
Hi, so glad you're here. If you don't mind, we'll let everybody get started, and then you can start right at the top of the hour, and then I will pop in the attendance for everyone. Is that all right, Gail?
Sure, whatever works for you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, y'all. We're so glad you're here. I do know that some of you are at school sites already, as some of you have probably already started. That is fine. We just want to make sure that you are present, and I am going to put in an attendance sheet for you to sign, and this is how it's going to work. So this is on the recording for everyone. You're going to go ahead and you're going to fill out the form for attendance, and then at the end of the session, I'm going to download the participant sheet so I can cross-reference who was here for the entire training. So the expectation is you are here for the entire training. This is very important for us as university students, as educators, and as professionals. So just so we're clear, I will also post this for everyone in the chat, these expectations, so that everyone is clear. Gail, does that sound appropriate to you as well?
Yeah, that's great.
Great. Okay. So again, I just have a few more people joining. Welcome. We're so glad you're here for the Title IX training. This will also cover many aspects of the mandatory reporting. Please be aware, as I'm putting this on the recording, that your districts may have very specific training that they require you to also go through, and you are to abide by those as you start working in your placements. All right. And so partnerships will work out to that. Partnerships will communicate to you through site coordinators what those expectations are. So right now you're doing what you need to do, unless you've already been told by a district, hey, we also need you to do this training. And I'm going to post at 11:05 our attendance sheet. You're going to fill that out. And then I will, at the end of this session, also be downloading the participant list to show who has stayed for the duration of the session. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask? And you can please post them to me and I will work on answering them. And then if they're good for the group, I will pause and interject those. Helpful? Sound reasonable? See lots of head nods. That's great. There's 10 screens of y'all. So thank you for letting me know. Okay. Wonderful. If site coordinators, if you are here, you are welcome to post. just to let your people know that you are here. It looks like some have chose to attend, which is fantastic. They are the most supportive, wonderful group. Wonderful. Okay. Any other questions before we get going? All right, Gail, I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself. We are very excited to have you here and really appreciative. So thank you so much for taking time to support us all.
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. I didn't know you were such a big group. My goodness. Um, so my name is Gail Mendez, and I am the director of the Center for the Prevention of Harassment and Discrimination here on campus at SDSU. I also serve as the campus's Title IX coordinator and discrimination, harassment, retaliation administrator.
And was that kind when I said I was like, hey?
Okay, so if everyone can mute, I'm getting some background from somebody. So whoever's unmuted, if you could please mute, that would be great. Okay, so that's my role here on campus. Is I am. I'm going to give it a minute. Sorry, guys. Let me see. Do you have the ability to mute all the participants?
I think it's Liz that's not muted.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Liz.
I share space. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I totally understand. It was a little bit of an echo for me. I can normally talk right over it. But okay, so my name is Gail. I told you a little bit about my role. So really, my main role on campus is I oversee the non-discrimination policy. So on our campus. So an important thing to sort of like orient you all. I know you're probably familiar with Title IX. As students, you've had to take trainings. But how Title IX works is Title IX is a federal law that basically says that every university has to have a policy on their campus that addresses any type of Title IX offense. And the CSU has chosen to do that in a non-discrimination policy. So our policy that covers Title IX is our non-discrimination policy, and it's broader than just Title IX. So the first thing our policy does that is important for you to know, because this is the policy that not only provides you protections as students or members of our community, it also comes with obligations and responsibilities for any student employee. And so it's really important that you understand this policy. It's bigger than just Title IX. So Title IX is a piece of it, but our non-discrimination policy, it not only prohibits Title IX offenses, which when we think of Title IX, we think of sexual assault, dating violence, stalking. It also covers discrimination on all the other protected statuses. So not just gender, it also covers discrimination based on race, ethnicity, disability, veteran status. There's 15 different protected statuses. So that's a first point of orientation for you all to realize that if you ever want to know, like the guiding document, it's the non-discrimination policy, and it's worth flipping through. Okay, so my office basically oversees that policy. So anytime a member of our community has a concern that they may have experienced the prohibited conduct, my office is the office that addresses it. And today, what I'm going to be talking to you about is a piece of that, which is mandatory reporting. So almost all employees at SDSU, whether they're student employees, even volunteers, are mandated reporters under Title IX. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I believe I've been allotted about an hour and a half, but it won't take that long. Normally, these presentations take a little less than an hour. So there'll be plenty of times for questions if you have them, but also you can just unmute yourself and ask a question during if anything comes up for you. Okay, so I'm going to try to share my screen. Let's see. Can you guys now see my PowerPoint? Yep. All right. I see some nods. Okay. So we're gonna go over mandated reporting. Let's see. Okay. So our plan today is we're going to talk about mandated reporting, but we're also going to talk about response best practices, because really what mandated reporting is contemplating is that you in your role are going to receive a disclosure from someone. Someone is going to go to you in your role and share with you that they have experienced prohibited conduct. And so we're going to talk about how you fulfill your mandated reporting obligations, but we're also going to talk about like best practices for how do you handle those conversations. Okay, so the terminology, even though we all say mandated reporting, it's actually the real terminology is a responsible employee. That's the actual language. So you are all responsible employees. So under university policy, any SDSU employee who knows or has reason to know of incidents that may violate the CSU non-discrimination policy has a duty to promptly report to the Title IX coordinator. That's me. Okay, so one important thing to realize is you are required to disclose all the information available, including the names of the parties involved, even when the person has requested to remain confidential. So it's really important for you to realize that whatever information you learn, you have to share that with me in its entirety. Okay. Okay. So in order to be able to fulfill this obligation, you're going to have to be able to sort of answer the following questions. You're going to have to know what conduct triggers my duty to report, what do I say, and how do I make a report, okay? So by the end of this, I want you guys to be thinking about, like, do I understand what conduct triggers my duty to report? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel confident that if this occurs, I know how to handle the conversation? And then do I understand the mechanics of it? Do I actually understand how to make a mandated report? Okay. All right. So the first thing is, what conduct triggers your requirement for mandated reporting? So the first thing is you have to realize that it's whenever you learn of any of this prohibited conduct: discrimination, harassment, domestic violence, stalking, sexual misconduct, or prohibited consensual relationships. And I'm going to go, that's all the prohibited conduct under the non-discrimination policy. So if you learn of any of this conduct, then you have an obligation to report it to my office. So I'm first going to go over a little bit about each of these to sort of orient you in them. So first, discrimination and harassment. Okay, so that is, again, broader than just gender. So you need to know what all the protected statuses are. So you need to look in the policy and sort of know, but the major ones are that occur most frequently is race, religion, or disability. But there are other protected statuses that can come up as well. So discrimination is anytime someone feels like they are being harmed, they are experiencing an adverse action because of that protected status. So if someone is disclosing to you that they believe that they are having a different experience, that someone has taken an adverse action against them because of their race, because of their religion, because of their gender, then you need to be hearing that person's talking about discrimination. Harassment is similar in that it has a protected status aspect, but a little bit different. So discrimination is somebody took an adverse action against me. Somebody, I wasn't given an opportunity because I'm a woman. I was graded more harshly because I'm a woman. That would be discrimination. Harassment is more about unwelcome conduct, is that there's unwelcome conduct that's happening to me because of my protected status. So a little bit different. It's not that big adverse action. I was denied a promotion. I was given a grade different than what I earned. I wasn't selected for any internships because I'm a woman. Harassment is I'm experienced conduct. That conduct can be verbal or nonverbal, right? So harassment could be, I'm subjected to misogynistic slurs all the time. There's comments about my appearance. Could be verbal nature, or it could be nonverbal. But harassment is really like someone saying, like, hey, this thing that I don't like, this unwelcome thing keeps happening to me, and it keeps happening to me because of my protected status. And so that's harassment. And so then we need to be listening for that. most people don't talk in policy talk. So when they're disclosing this to you, they're not going to say, hey, I feel like I've experienced an adverse action, right? They're not going to say that. They're going to go straight to just what they're experiencing. You need to hear that. You need to hear like, oh, that's not appropriate. That's an adverse action, or, ooh, that's repeated unwelcome conduct. Okay, so then the next one is domestic violence or dating violence. So for our policies, we have a pretty narrow definition of domestic violence and dating violence, actually. It only covers physical acts of dating or domestic violence. Domestic violence and dating violence can, in the real world, it also includes financial abuse, emotional abuse, but for our policies, all that's covered is physical abuse. So if someone's disclosing to you that within an intimate personal relationship, they're experiencing physical abuse, that would be domestic violence or dating violence. For our policies, it really only covers that intimate partner violence. Domestic violence is a broader concept. I was a practicing attorney for many decades in the domestic violence space, and the criminal and civil definitions are much broader domestic violence. You can experience domestic violence from a parent, from a relative, it can be financial, it can be emotional in the legal world. But for CSU policies, it only covers intimate partner violence. It's not family abuse, and it only covers physical abuse. And then stalking is also prohibited. So that is another one that is very common on our campus. Title IX really was birthed out of concerns about sexual assault, when statistically we knew that sexual assault was occurring at such a high rate that it was impacting people's ability to access their education. Most national surveys are coming back and stalking is occurring in even a larger rate of occurrence than sexual misconduct. So stalking is a very real thing in the digital age. Stalking, again, sort of like harassment, is like repeated unwelcome conduct. But the difference between stalking and harassment is stalking causes a reasonable apprehension of fear for your safety, for your well-being. I could be harassed but not feel unsafe. I could just be harassed and it interferes with my ability to do my education or my job. Stalking is the same concept of that repeated conduct that's unwelcome, but it has to reasonably make you fearful for your safety. So if you're hearing someone express like, this person won't leave me alone and I'm scared for my safety, that's stalking. And then sexual misconduct is probably the one you're most familiar with, that you get the most training on. I hope as students, that sexual misconduct covers all sexual activity, not just sex. Any sexual activity that happens between members of our community has to have affirmative consent, okay? So that very broad anytime someone is telling you that there was sexual activity that occurred that they did not fully consent to, you should be hearing prohibited conduct. That's a mandatory report. Affirmative consent does not require force. It does not require threats of violence. Affirmative consent means the person has to fully, without coercion, without pressure, affirmatively consent to the sexual activity. Okay? And then the last bucket of prohibited conduct is the one that sort of lives on an island by itself. It's fundamentally different than everything else I just talked about because it's consensual. Everything else I just talked about, someone's experiencing against their will. Someone is experiencing, they're not welcome, it's unwelcome, they oppose it. This is the only one that covers something that in theory we consented to, prohibited consensual relationships. So prohibited consensual relationships are where there is a power dynamic in play. So the CSU policy prohibits even consensual relationships. In this fact pattern, all the parties are agreeing to the relationship, but we do not allow consensual relationships where an authority aspect exists. So boss to employee, coach to athlete, teacher to student, resident advisor to dorm person, physical therapist to patient. If the person exercises authority over the other person, whether it's academic or employment, They are not allowed to enter into a relationship with that person. So if someone discloses to you that they are dating their teacher or that they are dating, their boss, that is a mandatory reporting situation. So the next thing to realize is like, well, okay, I understand the prohibited conduct that I'm listening for that people might tell me. But when is it triggered is when you know or have reason to know. So if someone discloses it, that's easy, right? I know the person came up to me and said, hey, the reason that I'm late for class today is because I had to take a different route because, this person who's been, stalking me, always shows up and I didn't want him to find me. So I took a different route to school. I'm sorry, I'm late. It's like, okay, I heard the stalking, you told me. But what is this? Or you have reason to know. So when you know or have reason to know this happened. So it's easy to know if someone just blatantly tells you, but reason to know normally means either you've observed it, say you're in a classroom and you observe harassing behavior, you observe stalking behavior, you observe the person who comes in with visible injury and you have concerns that it's from interpersonal violence, or you have enough information. You don't have all of it, but you have enough that a reasonable person would conclude, something's going on here. So they might talk all the way around it and never say it directly, but they tell you enough that any reasonable person would know that they are likely experiencing dating violence or stalking or sexual misconduct. So if you know or have reason to know of any of this prohibited conduct, the mandatory reporting obligation has been triggered. Okay, how do you handle it when someone, talks to you? You're going to be in positions of authority, you're going to be in positions of trust, and it happens more often than you think because all of this conduct combined is occurring all the time. So it is not going to be an uncommon experience for you all to receive these disclosures. So what I always say is, you're mandated reporters, and we want people to make informed choice about their own disclosure. So as early as possible, when someone comes up to you and you realize, oh, they're about to tell me something that's probably going to trigger my mandated reporting obligation. Like you can tell they're leading up to it. They're probably going to ask to talk to you in private. They might, preface it that like, I need to talk to you about something really important. As early in the conversation as possible, you need to politely pause them and let them know that you're a mandated reporter. So it's not that we're trying to message them, don't tell me, but we want them to make a choice about whether they want to report it or not, and for them to understand what's going to happen if they tell you. So as early as possible, you're going to pause them and say, just so you know, I am a mandated reporter. So if you're about to share with me XYZ, I am going to have to tell the appropriate people on campus, and they're going to follow up with support and resources for you. So this is just some sample language that's been provided. I want to let you know that I will be sharing this is like after the fact, they've told you, right? I want to let you know that I will be sharing what you have told me with a campus administrator. The university wants to make sure you have information and resources that might be helpful. They also want to make sure the campus is safe. You can decide how much or how little you want to share with them. That's up to you. It's just my job to let them know when someone has been hurt. So that's sample language. Okay, best practices when you have these disclosures. It's really important to listen respectfully and believe the person. There is severe underreporting of these crimes and prohibited conduct. So your ability to listen and respond in a non-judgmental way really can help change the culture and silence that exists around this. You might be the first person they're telling. You might not be. This might be something that they are dealing with in a lot of different aspects of their life, but it is possible that you are the first person they are telling. The first person someone tells and how that experience goes has tremendous impact on that person's healing trajectory. Often what survivors communicate is the secondary trauma of telling people and that experience. And it is really important that we don't cause harm. And so it is very important when you are trusted with receiving this type of sensitive information that you respond in a non-judgmental way, that you provide warmth and support without judging. You let them lead. It is not about you in that moment. It is about them. You allow them to share. You allow them to feel heard. You hook them up with resources. You ask them what they need. How can you help? But you do not judge. You know, it's important to let the victim survivor know that you care in a calm and compassionate tone. Thank you for sharing this with me. I realize that took a lot of courage. You can say we have a campus and we have a lot of resources to help. So if it's a member of our community that's disclosing to you, there's a lot of support out there, but it's very important. The most common mistake I see when people get these disclosures, look, it's okay to forget everything I said when that happens, and you don't say these words and you forget to tell them you're a mandated reporter, like that's all fixable. But what's most important is to be calm and compassionate. So what I often see is someone discloses something to someone, and the person that gets disclosed to puts their own level of emergency on it. Oh my God, that's horrible. I can't believe that happened to you. We need to go to the police right now. That's not empowering, you know, or it's the opposite. It's more dismissive. Are you sure? You know, are you sure? You know, sort of being dismissive and minimizing what they think. So I often see people either respond with the survivor themselves is quite calm and this is where they are in their road to healing. And the person that receives it is oh my gosh, the world's on fire. We have to do something right now. We don't want to do either. We just want to be calm and compassionate and hook that person up and for the appropriate professionals that know how to help. Okay, so remember to inform the person that you're not a confidential resource. We do have confidential resources on this campus. We have two. Either our therapists are confidential, and what I mean by confidential is they're not mandated reporters. They don't have to tell my office. So a therapist is a confidential resource, and we have victim advocates on our campus that are also confidential resources. But you need to let them know you are not one of those people. But if they would like to talk to a confidential resource, then you can provide them with the information about, you know, our victim advocates. You want to explain resources and options to the best of your ability. It's depending on the environment, those will look different depending on the person, what the resources and options are. You want to keep the victim survivors' needs and feelings at the center of the process, right? Like that's what I'm talking about, like not subliminally telling them what you think they should do next. You should go file a police report. You should go talk to an advocate. You should do this. None of that. You let them lead. And then after fulfilling your duty to report to Title IX, you need to keep the person's information as private as possible. Depending on the context, you might need to tell a supervisor. So if somebody has a legitimate business reason to know the information because you're coordinating care, then that's okay. But you don't need to be telling anybody else. It is a smaller world than you think. And even when you think that you are protecting their privacy because you're not using your name, you're not using any information, you don't know that for sure. And it's disrespectful to the person that disclosed to you. So it is not, you know, even sometimes it's sensational, right? Sometimes somebody tells you something and the fact pattern is really sensational and you can't believe it happened and all of that stuff, and you want to, you know, share it with your friends or whatever because it's so shocking. Please don't do that. Talk to the people that have a legitimate business reason to know. Certainly get support if you need support. If it's something that was difficult for you to hear and you're realizing that, oh, I need to process my own response to this, you can get support in that way, but it's not gossip. Okay, things to avoid. Don't make promises. Don't respond differently depending on ... And don't try to handle it internally investigate. So I'm going to go through those. Don't make promises. So the biggest one I see with employees, someone will tell them their fact pattern and what they experienced, say that they were sexually assaulted by a fellow student. And the person's like, oh, they'll be expelled for sure. You need to go to student conduct, or you need to go to Title IX and file a report, and they'll be expelled. They sort of make promises of what's going to happen when you can't do that. You don't know. So don't make any promises of what's going to happen to the wrongdoer or in the aftermath of it. When I say don't respond differently depending on ... I mean, don't respond differently for everyone gets the same calm, compassion, non-judgmental, start by believing response. Where I see this most is male victims tend to get less compassion than female victims or female identifying folks. So in my experience, when a male victim has come forward, there is more of an attitude to either not recognize it as abuse or to minimize it. And so I recently had a case with a male victim. He was a student employee on this campus, and a female student employee sexually assaulted him while at work, cornered him, kissed him against his will, and it happened on more than one occasion. And when he disclosed to his supervisors and others, they laughed it off. They laughed it off. They acted like, oh my God, well, aren't you, the man? Like, aren't you this, that, and the other? Like, they completely looked past the very real impact it had for him. And so it was really a reminder for me again that's still happening. I would think that we would do better than that, but he had disclosed and was trying to get help, and instead he got very dismissive attitudes about it not being that big of a deal for a woman to come onto a man without his consent. So we don't respond differently because of any characteristic of the person. If we hear the problematic conduct, we respond the same no matter what our internal judgments might be about how serious or not serious it is. And the other thing is not to try to handle it internally or investigate. A lot of times, especially if it happens within a community, like a school environment, a little club, a group of friends, and we sort of know all the actors and all that, we start talking to other people like, they said this, did this really happen? Or well, don't do that. You're not investigators. We have employed many investigators on this campus, but we don't want anyone not in the role to try to be gathering facts, to go out there and find out more information. Okay, so how do I make a report? So a lot of people ask like supervisor, police, advocate. None of those count. The only way to fulfill your mandatory reporting obligation is report to my office, to me. You can do it by emailing me. You can do it by calling us. There is an online form as well. I don't have the website here because it's currently under construction, but it should be up and running very, 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 very soon, hopefully this week. So you can go online and fill out a form. Quick SDSU Google search will get it to you. Or you can email me, call me, whatever you want to do, but that's the only way. Say you tell your supervisor thinking that your supervisor will then tell me you did not fulfill your obligation. Things die with supervisors all the time. People tell the supervisor and it never gets to me. That doesn't mean you can't tell your supervisor. That doesn't mean it's not appropriate to loop in your supervisor, but it does not fulfill your obligation. People think, well, I told the police, the person wanted to go to the police. I walked them over there. No, that doesn't do it. Or I referred them to advocacy services. No, that doesn't do it. All perfectly appropriate things to do. But the only way you really fulfill it is through telling me. That is by policy. That is not our rule. That's not my rule. That is by federal law that the Title IX coordinator has to be told. How this comes up is survivors have a right to file a complaint with my office, right? And in almost every investigation I do, I learn of all the mandated reporters that knew about it and never reported it to me. And so I think we educate the community on this, yet it still doesn't happen 100% of the time. And normally it's okay. sometimes more harm continued to happen, especially in dating violence, that might have been avoided if the mandated reporting would have happened earlier. So we really can cause harm by not getting the support around the person as early as possible. And then the second way it blows up is sometimes these cases, these Title IX cases, end up in litigation. Sometimes the survivor or the wrongdoer sues the university because they are unhappy with how the Title IX process went. And then it happens in the lawsuit to where it will inevitably come up that that survivor told you on this day and you didn't, and the person they told was a mandated reporter and nothing happened. And that is not a good day to be identified as a mandated reporter that did not fulfill their obligation in litigation. That is very bad. So it really, and unfortunately, this is a highly litigious field. And so you really are playing with a lot of liability if you don't fulfill this obligation. And the only way to fulfill it is to tell my office, not these other ways. So it's really important it happens the right way. Okay. The truth is that a lot of people that tell you, when you sort of cut them off early and you say, hey, I just want to let you know that I'm a mandated reporter, and I have to tell that people get scared. I mean, I wish that the term responsible employee was more in our vernacular. It's not, because mandated reporting sounds horrible. It sounds like something horrible is about to happen. But I think so the person that you tell, hey, I'm a mandated reporter, often will say, please don't tell anyone. I want to keep this in confidence. And you're not going to be able to do that, right? You're not going to be able to do that. So, but I think it's important to help them understand what that means and what it's going to look like when you fulfill that obligation. Because I think that a lot of people have the impression, a lot of survivors have the impression like, oh my goodness, something's about to happen. That's not my choosing. Like now Title IX's involved. Title IX's going to do X, Y, and Z, whether I like it or not. And that's almost never going to be true. So what happens when my office gets a report, and we get hundreds and hundreds of these every year, is we're going to get that report, we're going to read it and make sure like, okay, this person's in the right place. Like what happened here is prohibited conduct under the non-discrimination policy. And we're going to reach out to the survivor, the victim, directly. So we're going to acknowledge receipt. So say you fill out the report, I'm going to say, oh, we got your receipt. Thank you. We'll take it from here. If it's not obvious in the report, if I'm like that you informed the person that you're a mandated reporter, I might circle back with you and say, hey, did you tell the survivor that you are a mandated reporter? Because if you didn't, which is okay, if you forget in the moment, you sort of realize afterwards, like, oh God, I think that was a mandated report. I'm going to give you an opportunity to go back and tell that survivor that you're a mandated reporter before I reach out to them. Okay, because I don't want to break the trust. That person, it's really important. If someone discloses to you and you don't tell them that you're going to pass the information on to my office, and then I just reach out to them, that's very unstabilizing for the survivor. They feel like, oh my gosh, what happened? I told this one person, and now this person I've never heard of is reaching out to me. Like they think everyone knows. They're like, do all my professors know? Do they tell my parents? Like what's going on? It's very destabilizing for them. So if it's not obvious to me that you've had that conversation, I'm probably going to ask you like, hey, did you let them know that you were telling me? And if you're like, oh no, I forgot, I'll be like, okay, circle back with them, let them know that you have to tell me, just me, you're not calling their parents, you're not telling all their teachers, and that I'll be reaching out to be looking out for that, so that they know that that's coming. Okay, so then once we've closed that loop, then my office is going to reach out via email, very just friendly email, introducing ourselves, saying who we are, what we do, and inviting the person to come in for a meeting. If they don't respond, we'll probably try 2 times, maybe 3 times, depending on the facts, to get a hold of them. If they never respond, the vast majority of the time, then we just close it. They don't want our services. But before we close it, we're going to make sure that we send them information about their rights and their options and let them know that if they ever do want to come talk to us, that we are always available for them. There's no statute of limitations documentations that if they ever want help or to learn more about their resources, we're available to them. And we're going to provide them with a list of resources and make sure that they know their rights and their options. But if they never respond to us, we don't drag people in by their ears. Most people do respond and come in. The majority of people, when we reach out, we offer a meeting and say, hey, we heard this happened. We heard that you've experienced harm, and we'd really like an opportunity to sit down with you and make sure that that you have all the supportive resources available to you, that we talk about safety and your options to file a complaint if you choose to do so. So we're going to invite them in and have that conversation, that first conversation. And one of their rights is to file a complaint and request that the university investigate it. That's our mechanism for holding the wrongdoer accountable. Less than 10% of people choose that path. Most people just want support. So most people that come into my office, 90%, we meet with them, we learn what's happening. They do not choose to file a complaint or have an investigation against the wrongdoer. Instead, they just need academic support, emotional support. This obviously, you would know that these type of conducts has extreme impact for the person in all facets of their life. When people experience this type of harm, it impacts their school, it impacts their job, it impacts their family relationships, it impacts their emotional well-being, it impacts their physical well-being. And so there needs to be a tremendous amount of support put in to stabilize the person and to make sure that they are able to continue on their trajectory. And so that's why the intervention is so important, because it takes a tremendous amount of support in the wake of a tragedy like this. Okay, so, then my office, has the documentation, the compliance, right? Like that's just a reality that, like I said, this is a heavy, heavy litigious topic. So we need to document it. We need to document that the mandated reporting happened. We need to document that the person was told of their rights and was provided support. And then we can also provide consistent follow-up. So when someone experiences this type of harm, there's no cutoff for the support they receive from my office. For the rest of the time that they're a member of the SDSU community, we will support them. So many survivors work with my office for years and years and years. The conduct occurs their freshman year, and they continue to need support throughout their journey with SDSU, and we provide that. And so if the mandated report doesn't happen, none of this happens. And that's the problem. And none of this support happens. My office has the ability to provide academic assistance. So that often for a survivor, that looks like getting extensions on deadlines, changing class schedules, retroactive withdrawals, changing dorm rooms, living situations. Sometimes people need no contact orders. Sometimes people need really robust safety planning. So all of those things need to happen. There's financial aid impact, so we help with that. We do grade appeals if grades were impacted by it. There's just a tremendous amount of support available, but it only happens if the mandated report happens. All right. This is rare, but it happens. What happens if someone doesn't disclose to you as a victim, but discloses to you as a perpetrator? So this definitely happens. And everything I just said is a little bit different in this situation. You're still a mandated reporter for that situation, right? Because your mandated reporting is triggered when you know or should have known that prohibited conduct occurred. And so if a perpetrator is telling you, I have had sexual harassers brag about being sexual harassers to other people. I have had people disclose to people like, oh yeah, she said it wasn't consensual, but that's bullshit. She wanted it, like whatever, they're disclosing it. So if that happens, you are not going to interrupt that person and tell them you're a mandated reporter. You are just because it might not be safe for you to do so. So I do not want you to tell that person, hey, by the way, I got to go tell someone that you just told me this and you're about to get in huge trouble. Like that's not a good situation for you. So you just play it cool, you listen, You don't investigate, right? You're not trying to get more information. You're not being like, oh, tell me more, like, what do you mean she said that? Or what do you mean she said it wasn't consensual? You're not turning into an investigator. Just what they share is what they share without you asking probing questions, and you let my office know. But the reason we don't want you to tell them is, one, it could be safety concerns for you. This person might retaliate against you for that. But also there's just, if we're going to end up investigating that person for wrongdoing, it can impact the investigation if they know ahead of time, right? All of a sudden evidence gets destroyed, text messages get deleted, whatnot. So we don't normally cue to the perpetrator, like, by the way, an investigation's about to happen. So that one is just sort of silently hear the information, but don't let them know. If you feel unsafe, obviously you always go to UPD. If someone disclosed something to you and you feel unsafe, your safety is the most important thing. Okay, so that covers all the topics I wanted to talk about. So I definitely want to open it up to questions if anybody has any.
Hi, I do have a question. I was just gonna say, so if we're like student teaching at our placement, and like something does happen and we tell the student we have to report this, and like who is the first person we should go to? Because I know like some people say like school psych or like school admin, like the principal, like who should we go to first for all that?
Sure. So if you're in your school, your K through 12 placement, every school has a Title IX coordinator. Most K through 12s, it's more at the district level, they have a Title IX coordinator. Your school is going to have particular rules about their reporting structure. So if it's, a teenage, maybe you're in a high school or something like that. High schools have probably more staff on campus that are designated for it, but often like K through 5s don't. And it's like at the district level, but that's why it's going to be important for you to know the overlap of your site placements rules. These are the SDSU rules, right? The rules I just outlined are for like members of our community, but if it's a student victim, like a K through 12 student victim, your individual site's going to have the most. It is most likely going to be well, they don't always call them Title IX coordinators. They have other titles as well often, but you'll have to ask that particular school what their reporting structure is. And for you all, I would tell your sort of whatever, whoever oversees your placement, I would tell them as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? There might be some in the chat, I'm not sure. If someone approaches us and we tell them we are a mandated reporter and then they decide not to say anything, do we report what happened or just leave it? Great question. So it depends how far they got. If they got far enough for you to know that prohibited conduct occurred, then you still need to make the report. But if someone's like, hey, I want to be with you, I've been, I'm sorry, I haven't been in school for a week, you're probably wondering why, like, I've been dealing with something really, 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 really heavy, and and you stop them before you don't know whether it's DV, you don't know whether it's sexual assault, you don't know whether it's stalking, you don't know anything. You didn't get any of those facts. You just got, I'm experiencing trauma. I had a traumatic event happen. And that's all you got, then no. You want to make sure though, like when you cut someone off and they choose not to share, you want to make sure you are putting a confidential resource in front of them, because they obviously are experiencing impact. That's why they started saying it. They're scared. They're stopping because they're scared you're a mandated reporter. So you can say, I noticed now that you've learned I'm a mandated reporter, you no longer want to share it with me. I really want to make sure you get in front of a confidential person so that you can explore your options and rights and learn about all that without it triggering for you. So like for us, that's a campus advocate. There's advocates there's school advocates all over the place, but advocates are going to be a confidential resource. So see if your placement has an advocate if it's a young student. We're really not trying to discourage, because clearly the person probably would benefit from intervention and resources, right? They're almost telling you, but they're scared and they stop. And so one, you might want to say, you might want to explain to them what that means. Like, hey, I noticed like now that I said that you're scared to tell me, I just want to make sure that you know what that means. That does not mean that there's going to be this intervention from Title IX, that they're going to drag you into some process. It just means that we're going to let that person know, and they're going to reach out to you to give you your options and your rights and support. But I really, really try. But if you don't know what happened, if you don't know or should know that prohibited conduct occurred, because maybe they were going to tell you that grandma died, like you don't know. I mean, so then no, you don't have to make a mandated report. But I always, want to make sure that the person is hooked up with supportive resources no matter what. Do we also need to report to you after report it to our schools? Not if it's a student, like your K through 12 student. No, they're not covered by my policy. So this will, you're just employee. So if you learn in your employment context as a member of our community, so that could be one of your fellow cohort members. Sometimes I'll be honest with you, sometimes like this mandatory, like it protects you as well. A lot of the times people are in placements and they experience harassment. The most common reports I get when it deals with placements, internships out in the community is you all experience harassment, or one of your cohort members experiences harassment in their placement. And then you would need to tell me, or one of your cohort members discloses to you what they're experiencing, or you are somehow being harmed. But otherwise, the mandatory reporting only applies to if it's the person disclosing to you is any part of our community. So volunteer, any visitor on our campus, student, staff, faculty, employee, anyone like that. Okay, Andrew?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. If I'm in a group of like, let's say 3 other mandated reporters are a group, and then we see something and are like, if one of them is like, oh, I got it, does it mean the other ones don't do it? Or we all got to report it?
All of you do it. We get duplicate referrals all the time. I want you all covered. I don't want any of you having to be deposed in a court case because you didn't do it. So I'll do it. We quickly weed through that. We'll get because most people, once they start disclosing, they sort of start disclosing. And so we often get it from all different places, but they're all slightly different is one thing I'll say. People hear different things. And so it really helps if we just get all of them. And don't worry, we're not going to reach out to that person 12 times. Like we realize it's all about the same person. There was a question, how should we handle the situation if it is not the survivor coming to us, but a friend or family member who's someone who witnesses? It's still a disclosure, doesn't matter. That's common. So if you know or have reason to know, whether you learn it from the actual survivor or the friend or family, it's still a mandated report. If we had something happen to us at a school site, should we report it to SDSU or the school site? Probably both. So definitely report it to me because I want to problem solve with you. But often, so I haven't had it happen in the K through 12 in a long time. But I have had it happen when we, like our nursing program, when we place them in hospitals. And sometimes we no longer place them in those environments. Like if we're not satisfied with the efforts that the site makes to provide a safe environment for our students, then we are going to revoke our MOU or our contract with that site. If we don't feel like it. So they're the ones that control the environment. So we're probably going to have to inform them as well. So you're going to tell me because my office has the ability to put more holistic support around you, right? Like this might impact you more than just at your site, but the site is going to be responsible for really the interventions at the site. Like what happens to the wrongdoer at the site? What safety are we putting? What preventative efforts are we doing at the site to make sure it doesn't reoccur? That's going to largely happen with the site manager's coordination, but I would still want to know and need to know because you might have more impact than just that, right? Like it might not even be obvious to you in the moment that like this is going to impact you later or you're going to need more support. And also I want to know because you might think it just happened to you, but then you call me and you tell me where you're placed. And I look it up and I'm like, oh yeah, we got a report 2 years ago of another intern that had a negative experience there too. And it starts building. And then, so we very much want to know if you're having those experiences in your sites. And yes, but we probably will have to coordinate with the site manager as well. Would the issue revealing you're a mandated reporter matter if the person comes to you specifically because they assume you are a mandated reporter? Yeah, so that's actually for as many people that are like, oh no, you're a mandated reporter, please don't tell anyone. I thought I was just telling you because I like you, I trust you, I don't want anyone else to know. It is just as often that I hear from people like, right, they're going to you in that role because they assume you have specialized knowledge as an employee on how for them to get help. And so when it doesn't, so you like if they're saying like, yeah, the purpose of them telling you is because they want intervention, they want help, then right, you don't have to be so clunky about it of like, just so you know, I'm a mandated reporter, but you're still going to let them know what the next steps are. But I even had someone recently who they told a mandated reporter, and the mandated reporter did not do it and did not ever make the report. And they felt the person they told, they also considered a friend. And they were really hurt. They're like, I know they didn't do it because they were my friend. And I was sort of saying at the same time that I didn't want them to make the mandatory report. But I think I actually did. Like, I didn't realize at the time, but I think I was asking for help. I think I did want help and I did want it to stop. And I wish they would have done their mandated reporting. I knew they were a mandated reporting. And even though I wasn't necessarily fully ready to come forward, they sort of, when they self-reflected on it later, they realized that they really wish the person would have done the mandated report because they ended up staying in the relationship for another, very long time and experienced more harm. You mentioned that some offenses are considered illegal, but don't trigger a mandated obligation. Do we still have the obligation to voluntarily report? Yes. So that's in the DV concept, right? So I mentioned that our definition of DV is very narrow because we only cover physical interpersonal violence. But real life DV is much broader than that. We experience domestic, just means in the home, violence from people outside of dating relationships, and it often is just emotional abuse. Emotional domestic violence abuse is just as impactful as physical violence. So it doesn't trigger it, right? Because it's not covered by our policy. But if somebody is sharing with you that experience, most likely it's because they're experiencing tremendous impact and we still want to put support around them. What we don't have the ability to do is hold the wrongdoer responsible. So like if you, like a student at SDSU, if a fellow student is committing dating violence under our policy, they have the right to file a complaint and we will discipline. If the investigation finds that there was physical domestic violence, we will discipline that wrongdoing student. If it's just emotional abuse, we don't have the ability to discipline that student. Filing the complaint is not an available option, but the support is still an available option. So I do encourage people to over-report in that situation. It's not mandatory. So if someone's disclosing to you, like I'm in an extremely emotionally controlling, abusive relationship. I haven't been physically harmed yet, but this person, the fact pattern is going to be very extreme. This person controls my movement. They monitor all my communications. They don't let me see my friends and family, all of that stuff. That might not be physical abuse, but that person needs supportive resources and we will still provide them, whether or not it technically is DV under our policy. All very great questions. Let's see, this may be a very specific scenario, but are there any protections for us as mandated reporters in situations where we personally know the perpetrator and are worried about our personal safety as well, i.e. retaliation? Is the mandated reporter that reported the situation shared with the perpetrator? So no. So the question is really getting at like, hey, so I got a disclosure. I'm going to tell the victim I'm a mandated reporter, so they're going to know I passed on the information. But would the perpetrator ever know that I passed on the information? Maybe an extremely rare occurrence. They would know, like, if it ends up in litigation, because then everything is sort of public. But otherwise, we do not include who made the mandated report anywhere in our process. So even if it goes to a full investigation where there's findings and discipline and all of that, we just say we received a mandated report. We never say who we received it from, and we don't need to. So very, very rarely. Now, the victim might tell them, but my office isn't going to. And there are protections against retaliation. So anybody who exercises any right under the non-discrimination policy is protected from retaliation. So a lot of people think when I say, oh, we cover Title IX and DHR, discrimination, harassment, retaliation. Retaliation is probably the least understood of the prohibited conduct, because people think retaliation just like what the word means. Like, I did something and now someone does something back to me. I'm being retaliated against. Retaliation under the policy only covers retaliation for someone exercising a right under the policy. So that means filing a complaint, participating as a witness, opposing prohibited conduct. So like if you saw someone acting discriminatorily against someone else and you opposed it, you said, hey, knock it off, don't say that. Or if you fulfilled mandated reporting, all of that is exercising rights under the policy. And if you exercise a right under the policy, you are protected against retaliation. So if you felt like you were experiencing retaliation because you made the mandated report, maybe the survivor tells the perpetrator and now the perpetrator is taking action against you or harassing you, you come let me know, because we have retaliation protections. Why is it that only physical violence is covered? Great question. I don't know the answer. So the question is, why do we take such a narrow approach? I mean, it's currently the federal definition. So, the definitions change with every presidency we have. We just got a new policy in August 1st. So even though Biden only has 2 more months in office, his Title IX rules just went into effect 2 weeks ago. Before that, we had, 4 years of the Trump regulations, and everyone chooses every administration chooses to craft definitions differently. I don't know why they've struck such a narrow definition. If I had to guess, it's because the emotional abuse would be it's an extremely difficult thing to establish. It's very common, and I think they just want a bright line rule of like, when is a relationship so unhealthy that it should be actionable and that someone should be punished for it, is a hard line to craft. And so I think they've just chosen a bright line rule of physical abuse, even though that leaves out a lot of really problematic conduct. Is the process the same if the perpetrator is the one who tells us about the situation? No. So if the perpetrator tells you and you tell me, like, it's very fact specific what I do with that. So like when my office receives that, you're like, oh, one, I got to figure out, do I have an identifiable victim? And so you tell me, you're like, hey, this person just disclosed to me that they did this horrible thing at a party last weekend to somebody. And we might not have the identity of that victim. And so I got to figure out if I can figure out who that victim is. If I can figure out who the victim is, I'm going to start with them, and I'm going to reach out to them and invite them in and say, hey, I heard that you might have experienced harm at the party last weekend. I was wondering if you're willing to talk to me about that. And then it's almost always the victim's choice of whether there's an investigation or not. Almost always, not always, there is exceptions to that, but almost always it's going to be the victim's choice. But often in those cases, we have an unidentified victim. And then I have to figure out, if I don't have a participating victim, do I have enough? Do I have enough information to hold someone accountable? it has happened. I have pursued investigations with I did not know the identity of the victim, but I was able to get enough concrete information that the conduct occurred even without the identity of the victim. But it can be very challenging, but it's going to be very fact specific. But if I do have an identified victim, then it's going to be their choice almost, 99% of the time, whether they want to file a complaint and pursue an investigation. Do we also report to you if it happened to us? So that's your choice. It's not a mandated reporting obligation. If someone is not required ever to self-disclose that they are a survivor of any of these offenses. So that is a personal choice. If you have experienced any of these harms in your capacity as a SDSU community member, you have the right to come to my office and learn about your rights, options, and resources. But whether you exercise that right is completely up to you. If that is something that you are debating, that you don't know whether that's right for you, I strongly encourage talking to our advocates, because our advocates are wonderful, wonderful human beings. I get 100% positive feedback from people who have it, and they are well versed in knowing what the Title IX process looks like, knowing what the criminal justice process looks like. Advocates are if my office does an investigation, the survivor has the right to have the advocate with them for all investigatory meetings, all hearings. Advocates are at any detective interview. Advocates they are allowed to go with you to court. If you have that, they are with you in a SART exam. They are very knowledgeable about what these processes look like and how people tend to experience them. And they're trained in helping people make choice and about what makes sense for them, what their goals are, whether a process matches their goals or doesn't match their goals. And so they're very good at partnering with people to make decisions around how do I want to deal with the aftermath of experiencing this conduct? Does this make sense? So I cannot rave about advocacy enough. So if you or anyone you know has experienced this and is not quite sure what they want to do, that is the place to start. Okay, I don't see any more questions coming in. Anybody else? Thank you, guys. I really appreciate your really thoughtful questions. I hope you have wonderful placements. If anything comes up, please let me know. I'm here for you. I give consultations all the time. And so if you would don't hesitate to reach out to me or even come visit me. Okay. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Gail, I love you've got 67 strong thank yous here in the chat.
Okay. Love it.
I will be 68. Thank you so much. This was fantastic and really insightful. I just want to say you did a great job of applying it to our unique situations as practitioners in schools. And so reaction with emojis. Thank you so much. It was really,
you guys. I
really
appreciate
wonderful.
it.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
There was a question.
Okay.
Are you able to provide the slides?
Oh, absolutely. I'll send them over.
So we'll send that out to everybody as an option. And thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
I have already taken note of who is here. And so you are all free to go.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.